Hello, my name is Ed Batista. I'm an executive coach in San Francisco, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes about feeling safe in an unsafe world. So to do that, I'm going to use a very reductive model of the universe. This is admittedly oversimplified, but I think it will be useful for a start. So a profound psychological need that we have as human beings is a sense of safety. We yearn for safety. To some extent, this is the result of evolution. Our distant ancestors who were a little bit more attuned to danger were much more likely to pass their genes down. And as a consequence of thousands of generations of human beings, the result is that we are a profoundly anxious species. And a sense of safety is necessary for us to overcome that anxiety and get on with our daily functioning. This is also the result of what we might think of as the curse of consciousness. Consciousness offers many advantages, and it renders us aware of our mortality in a way that other animal species are not. Certain intelligent animals, elephants, ravens, some species of whale, do seem to indicate an awareness of death. But they're not necessarily, it seems unlikely that they're aware of their individual mortality that is impending in the future. And we as human beings suffer under that burden uniquely. And so creating a sense of safety around us is profoundly important and yet often difficult. Here's how we go about it, or we believe the path to safety lies through establishing a greater sense of certainty and control over our environment. When we can predict what's going to happen with some certainty, when we can exert agency and control what happens, we feel safer. But what is the relationship between these two dimensions? Is it linear? Now, what I see in my practice is that we often act this way, which sort of presupposes a relatively safe and predictable world already. In a relatively safe or predictable world, the initial amounts of certainty and control that we are able to exert don't grant us that much safety because it's already a relatively safe environment. And so we strive at the outer limits to get additional certainty and additional control. We look to create an environment in which we can be almost 100% certain about what's going to happen in the future, where we can act with tremendous control and authority and agency. And that's super important to us because we believe that that is the path to experiencing safety. Well, what I'd like to presuppose, though, is, well, what if it's like this? The blue curve here we might think of as representing a world that is somewhat unpredictable, somewhat chaotic, somewhat unsafe, in which the initial efforts that we are able to take to gain a degree of certainty and control over our environment grant us a tremendous amount of safety and security, and further efforts at the outer reaches to gain more certainty and control over our environment may do relatively little to change our sense of safety. What if you take a step further? What if it's really like this? What if it's a very unpredictable, unsafe, and profoundly chaotic world? In that context, just a little bit of certainty and control goes a long way towards establishing all the safety that we need, and any efforts beyond that are really going to be relatively useless. And I think the events of the last few months have caused us to start to ask this question: what kind of world do we live in? And I would suggest that we live in a world that's a lot more like the blue curve. We live in a world that is less predictable, more chaotic, less safe. And as a result, our efforts, our initial efforts to establish some control and certainty may be all that we need to really grant us the requisite safety that allows us to simply function effectively. However, it's also worth asking the question, what if there really isn't a relationship? What if there is no relationship between our sense of safety, our actual safety, and the sense of certainty and control that we enjoy? Well, one reason why this might be is, what if control is an illusion? The eminent psychotherapist Sheldon Kopp wrote many decades ago, control is an illusion, that the sense of control that we enjoy is illusory entirely, and that we pursue it only to create this sense of safety. What if we go a step further and ask, well, what if safety is too? What if the sense of safety that we seem to be striving to achieve is also an illusion? If so, I think that then poses this really difficult question that we have to wrestle with. How do we feel safe in an unsafe world? I don't have a definitive answer, but I have a provisional one. And that's emotion regulation, by which I want to be really clear. I do not mean emotion suppression. We can't suppress our emotions for any sustained period of time. If we try, it's usually counterproductive and sometimes makes the feelings that we're looking to hold at bay even more intense. And there are some pathways that we can pursue, some practices that allow us to develop our capacity for emotion regulation. We can remember them by this simple, cheesy acronym, MESS. I'm not a fan of cheesy acronyms. This is literally the only one that I use in my practice and my teaching. M for mindfulness. And the most reliable path to a mindful state is meditation. There are other practices, walks, time in nature, certain forms of exercise. The research on meditation, if I'm being overly simplistic about it, says, hey, if we can meditate on a consistent daily basis for about 10 minutes, we will start to see and experience some distinctions in our ability to regulate our emotions after about 2 months. So it takes some time to get over that hurdle. Exercise and a regular commitment to physical activity is important because emotions are physiological events before they register in consciousness. So when we're more regularly active on a consistent basis, we're better attuned to what we're feeling earlier in the process. Sleep, incredibly important, because a lot of research shows, an ample body of research shows, that when we are not well rested, our ability to regulate our emotions diminishes significantly, and reducing chronic stress. And I want to be really clear, I'm not suggesting that we should be striving to live in a stress-free world. That's likely impossible, especially these days. Nor do we need to view stressful experiences as inherently negative. It's how we respond to those experiences that matters. But there are, in many ways, fairly low-level chronic stressors in our life that with some modest changes, we might be able to minimize or remove entirely. By committing to these kinds of simple practices on a consistent basis, we can enhance our ability to regulate our emotions and take some meaningful steps towards feeling safer in an unsafe world. Thank you.